Welcome to Mach 10 Sports in this December 4th, 2023 episode. A lot has happened since the last time I saw you. A lot has happened. We crowned an SEC champion for this football season. Did it on Saturday evening, Saturday afternoon. Obviously, the Alabama Crimson Tide, your 2023 SEC champs, had a classic game down in Atlanta with Georgia, two teams that respect the crap out of each other. But somebody had to lose, but Alabama is your 2023 SEC champ. We crowned that. We now know who the four teams are that still have national championship aspirations still intact. We'll talk about that. I'll give you my thoughts on the college football playoffs, where they went wrong, where they went right, what I would have done. We have 8 other teams in the SEC. They know their bowl destinations. We'll discuss, we'll briefly preview those matchups. It's portal season. It's pure chaos. It's also contact period. Coaches going in home on different college campuses. These kids' houses, they're going in homes with these parents, mom, dads, grandpa, brother, and sister. Chaotic part of the year. Portal window, we mentioned, going all the way till January 4th. It'll be a month period. Players meetings, retention. That's big. Keeping your current players happy. I've never understood going to pay for a high school kid that hasn't shown that he can produce at this level and not give some type of money or NIL deal to the guy who started at right guard for you for 2 years. It's about retention. I mean, you may not think about the right guard because you don't really see his face a lot on your team. Obviously, football's a little different than basketball. A lot of these basketball guys, they get their face seen because obviously they're not wearing helmets. 2 + 2 = 4. But we forget about some of these guys who started a year and a half, 2 years, that have shown productivity at this level. You got to retain those guys, those players, individual position coaches, coordinators, head coaches, meeting with those players. Then you get a little bit of your off-the-field support staff starting that bowl prep. They know the bowl opponent. Last week, those guys did a lot of quality control, going through some self-scout because you just didn't know who your bowl opponent was. Now they do. So you have the analysts, all the GAs and stuff starting to run all those reports through 12, 13 games, depending if your opponent in the bowl game played in the conference championship or not. And then you're starting to start script practice. Maybe not this week, but next week for sure. Just a lot going on in the world of college football right now. It's that time of year too. It's starting to get a little colder for whatever reason. It's December 4th. It's not been cold. Looking at the weather before we got on the show tonight, randomly enough, it's going to get a little colder. So when I'm letting my dog out in the middle of the night tonight, got to put on a jacket. I advise you to. Geez, man, college football season just flew by. Got a lot going on. I don't even know where to begin, though, when it comes to college basketball with the SEC. It's Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. It's all over the place. I have no feel for how to rank all these 14 teams, but I did. I put out my power rankings around lunch today on social media, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Put it out there. I've seen some other people that I respect put out some SEC basketball power rankings. We couldn't be totally different. I mean, shouldn't say that. Most of us have the top 2 around the same, but your guess is as good as mine, but we'll talk about it. A lot of tough losses. Mississippi State losing to Southern University. Kentucky taking a big loss this week after having a big win last Tuesday against Miami. A lot of up and down in the SEC. A lot of bad losses. I think the SEC already has, we'll talk about it here a little bit later in the show, 8 quad 3 and quad 4 losses through the season already. There's teams that haven't even played 8 games yet. Rough start for the league. I'm going to give it my best shot, though. But before we get started reviewing the SEC championship game, Alabama, Georgia, talking about the playoffs, let's go around the SEC as we normally do to start the show if you're a frequent viewer. Elijah Robinson, defensive line coach from Texas A&M, he will be joining his cousin, Fran Brown, the new head coach for the Orange, as the defensive coordinator. A lot of people thought he would stay at Texas A&M, and why this is a big deal is because he wanted to be the defensive coordinator. Mike Elko, I guess, just didn't think he was ready. For whatever reason, a lot of defensive line coaches don't get a shot to become defensive coordinators as quickly because a lot of people assume, and again, stereotypes are usually stereotypes for a reason. It's true a lot of the times, but he thinks he may not have known maybe the second level, but definitely the back end. For whatever reason, it's usually guys who have secondary backgrounds have to understand the stuff in front of them. But a lot of the defensive line coaches out there don't get defensive coordinator opportunities because it's assumed they don't know the stuff behind them. I take a sip out of the glass there. But that is a big loss because he had a great relationship with a lot of players on that team. Walter Nolan entered the portal for Texas A&M from Knoxville, Tennessee. Rumored to be an Alabama-Tennessee battle, but everybody's up for it. I mean, you don't have these. This is a first-round draft pick entering the transfer portal. His NIL value is going to be off the charts because we're always going to have the quarterback NIL transfer market. And that's an entity in itself. You're always going to have a lot of receiver skill guys, some running backs. First-round defensive tackles entering the transfer portal a year early. You don't see that a lot. There's going to be a lot of high suitors there. Great relationship with Elijah Robinson, like a brother to him. Because Elijah's not old. He's probably about 36, maybe 37, 38, something like that. Just past his mid-30s. Great relationship with Walter Nolan. Maybe give Syracuse a look. I don't know, but I'm hearing Tennessee and Alabama on that end. And it may lose a couple guys they were not expecting if Elijah Robinson was going to stay. I'd heard Mike Elko had offered Elijah Robinson to be the highest paid position coach in college football, but was not going to give him the defensive coordinator title. Maybe Elijah Robinson, or maybe Mike Elko didn't think Elijah Robinson was ready. Remember, they'd worked together for 4 seasons, so it wasn't like he just didn't know. But Elijah Robinson, the interim head coach at Texas A&M, now heading to Syracuse to work for his cousin, Fran Brown, who was the secondary coach at Georgia. He's now the head man in Syracuse. Elijah Robinson, new defensive coordinator there. Texas A&M did not waste any time replacing Elijah Robinson. They now have their new defensive line coach, Sean Spencer, coming over from Florida. Was there for Billy Napier's first 2 years, got let go. He'd been with Elko, I believe. Western Carolina, something like that. They've worked together. Sean Spencer had been with the Giants before, so it's already a quick replacement. Smart move by Mike Elko there. And then from another coaching staff standpoint, Jeff Lebby completes his staff, completes his his offensive staff, and kept the defensive coach. But Anthony Tucker, assistant head coach for the running backs, he will be the running backs coach, assistant head coach. Cody Kennedy coming over from Arkansas was Sam Pittman's right-hand guy. He got lured away from Mississippi State, kind of, I think, a mutual departing. Apparently, Cody Kennedy is like a son to Sam Pittman, so I don't think he wanted to let him go. So when he probably got this offer, he told him, probably need to take it. You're saying that. John Cooper, tight ends coach, he worked with Jeff Lebby at UCF. Mike Holisek, I think he'd been an analyst for Jeff Lebby, even going back to Ole Miss, brought him with him to Oklahoma, so that makes sense. Chad Bumpus got retained, former Mississippi State wide receiver. He's still the wide receivers coach. Then David Turner, who I worked with at Texas A&M, been around the block in the SECs, had a couple tours at Mississippi State before. He is getting retained. He was on Zach Arnett's staff, Mike Leach's staff. He's getting retained as the defensive line coach. He was there a lot with Fletcher Cox, Montez Sweat. He coached a lot of those guys. But Mississippi State staff coming together. Texas A&M, on the other hand, seems to be taking their time a little bit with this. Seems to be taking their time a little bit with these hires. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes from that perspective. But that is around the SEC. Now it's time to talk about what you probably came to listen to. We revealed a top 4. We revealed the 2023-24. They played on January 1st, the Rose Bowl and Sugar Bowl playoffs. We got the Final 4. Officially came in with Michigan coming in at 1, Washington coming in at 2, Texas coming in at 3, Alabama at 4, Florida State 5, Georgia 6. So unless you've been living under a rock, that's where it was. That's 1 through 6. Obviously, they made it. They dramatized it a little bit. Obviously, revealed 1 through 3 real fast. And I'll be one to say, I was texting my buddies, once Texas came in at number 3, I knew Alabama was 4. If Florida State would have stayed at 3, I don't think Alabama gets in over Texas. And apparently they do something where they put them in 3 different groups. So they would have paired Michigan, Washington, Texas, compared them, ranked them. Then they would have compared Alabama, Florida State, and Georgia. And that probably benefited Alabama because Alabama, the only common opponent out of those 3 was Alabama and Georgia. And Alabama obviously beat Georgia less than 24 hours before that. So that probably benefited Alabama a little bit, which, I mean, again, I'll talk about where I would change my things up a little bit here. But the thing I don't get, and again, I think they did how do I phrase this? When I was prepping for the show this morning, I wanted to think about how do I want to phrase what I am about to say. They got it to the most realistic expectation possible using the combination of a body of work and eye test. And people always look at me like, eye test is so subjective. It's all subjective, people. We have a committee of 13 people. We're dealing with human beings here. You're about to get me worked up with the whole eye testing. You have to calculate the eye test in. You have to. I mean, or why would we watch the games where we should just let a computer spit out results for us? You got to use your eye test. We're on a committee. I want other people's opinions, because if we all just think the same, what are we doing? So it has to be, it can't just be the eye test, like I said last episode. It can't just be the body of work. It's got to be married perfectly. And to the credit of the committee, I don't think they did a good job the first 6 weeks, but I think the last week, they probably could have set themselves up better to not getting as much critique as they have now if they would have done some stuff on the front end of this. But I think at the end, they did the best job of marrying that. I really do. I thought they did the best job, the most realistic group when you marry both. Again, the eye test and body work, you have to meet somewhere in the middle. My final four, if we're just going by the best teams, and again, you can go look up in the college football committee's mission statement. They talk about getting the 4 best teams. The 4 best teams, in my opinion, if you just want to go by best, Michigan 1, Texas 2, Alabama 3, Georgia 4. I don't know how you could even debate it. Some people, well, what about Washington? I don't think they're the 4 best teams right now. And again, I think it's a favorable matchup for Washington against Texas. Texas has kind of got a weak secondary. Washington's got Michael Penix. They got some NFL receivers. I like Texas a lot. I think they can win it all. People are like, well, they'll dominate Washington up front, Washington's offensive line up front. Washington doesn't run between the tackles, so that may be an irrelevant matchup. It's never irrelevant, but it might not be as big of an issue as some people are thinking. But again, that's what I would have. Michigan 1, Texas 2, Alabama 3, Georgia 4. If we're talking best, most deserving, which I'm not for this. This is, to me, in my opinion, tell me if I'm wrong, this is everyone gets a trophy kind of way. But if we're going most deserving, just looking at the win-loss record, I'd go Michigan 1, Washington 2, Florida State 3, Texas 4. I think Texas always had to get in before Alabama. Same record, conference champs, head-to-head. I don't care if it was all the way back in September. I don't care. About to get me worked up here. I gotta get a sip of water in here. But yeah, remember, when I'm talking about this, we always have to factor in the eye test and body of work into one. I think it's just common sense. Can't just look at wins and losses, or Liberty got screwed out of the playoffs. Liberty should be in the playoffs, according to some here. They should. They got totally screwed. Why would Liberty? They're 12-0, 13-0. If we're just doing records here, might as well. And again, I always say this about college football. It's one of the few things out there. Not all schedules are created equally in this sport. Liberty never played Alabama's conference schedule. Conference USA, I know I'm not reinventing the wheel here. Again, I'm telling you common sense stuff, but I think this is pretty common sense stuff. Liberty didn't play the same schedule as Alabama. And if you don't know that, you've been living under a rock. But I'll say this. If you have a heart or you have any kind of empathy, you absolutely feel for this Florida State team. You do. Mike Norvell did a great job. Jordan Travis, you feel bad for him. He tweeted at Jalen Milroe, telling him to go win it. Seems like a great kid. They literally did everything that was asked for them. They defeated every opponent in front of them. It's just an unfortunate situation this season where you had to start splitting hairs because you had realistically 8 teams who could really have an objective argument of getting in. Even Ohio State, one lost team. I think there were 8 legitimate teams this year. So people may not believe me in the Ohio State thing, but I'll stand on that. I think you have 7 guaranteed, 8 legitimate teams with a gripe. But if you want to blame anyone, if you're a Florida State fan, blame the 2023 season. I know that's not a specific person or anything. It's just an unfortunate season. We've never seen anything like this before. And this was the first Sunday in early December where this committee, and I know it's different each year, they had to make a decision. They had to make the first hard decision they've ever had, probably since 2014. And it was going to piss somebody off. It was going to piss off Alabama, it seemed like, or it was going to piss off Florida State. I mean, you've seen Florida State's AD, Michael Alford, come out. Mike Norvell obviously come out. They've all issued a statement. The ACC commissioner issued a statement. Hell, even Donald Trump, he tweeted he wanted to blame Ron DeSantis for not lobbying enough for his home state team. I mean, that's where we're at for this. But it's just a series of unfortunate events. If Jordan Travis is healthy, I've said this the whole time for the past 3 weeks, even when they were down 13-0 North Alabama. If Jordan Travis is healthy, Florida State gets in at 13-0 as a conference champion. I think they'd have a legit shot to win a game, maybe win it all if some things go right, playing well offensively. Their defense is really good. It really is. I like Jared Verse. I like Tatum Bethune at the inside linebacker. I like Florida State's defense. They can compete with anybody. But anyone who is telling you currently right now, and I'm not even talking about them playing with their third-string quarterback. I'm talking about even with Tate Rodemaker. Anyone who tells you currently Florida State is a current top 4 team, and if we're trying to get the 4 best, if we're trying to get the best, not the most deserving, trying to get the 4 best in the country, and you're telling me Florida State is a top 4 team right now, if you watch this sport and can honestly tell me that without any bias, you're just blinded with complete bias, like I just said, or you just don't know what you're looking at on Saturday. If you're telling me right now you think Florida State, and everybody I've ever brought it up to, do you think Florida State's a 4 best team? I mean, no, dude. I've seen people preface videos today. Now, I'm not saying Florida State's better than Alabama. I don't think so. But why do we even play the games? I can't stand when people say, why do we even play the games? I can't stand it. How would I know who is good and who is bad if we didn't play the games? I don't know about you people, but I don't have those kind of powers that can just look at a team's name and make, yeah, they're good. I mean, if we didn't play the games, how would I know if they're good or not? Again, a lot of this is common sense. I mean, again, it's subjective. We're ranking college football players from 18 to 22, putting them on a team and trying to rank who the top 4 teams are. Yeah, that's what we're doing. But I can't stand the why do we even play the games? How would I know who was good if I couldn't watch the games? And again, all schedules are not created equally in college football. And I think people forget about that until you tell them. But both things can be true here. Florida State absolutely has every right to be upset. But at the same time, Florida State is not a top 4 team in the country right now with their backup quarterback. Any other year, Florida State is in, even without Jordan Travis. I just think this was a exception, not the rule, compared to the other seasons we've had since 2014 when the 4-team college football playoff started. I mean, the only other time we could have had this argument was that year in 2014 with Ohio State playing with third-string quarterback Cardell Jones in TCU, and who else did I mean? And Baylor. But people are going to be like, well, Ohio, you say that don't put them in with the third-string quarterback. Ohio State went and did it, and they won the whole thing. They beat Alabama, and they beat Oregon to win it all. Comparing apples and oranges. Cardell Jones and Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game that year, Cardell Jones being the third-string quarterback, went and won 59-0 against Wisconsin. Florida State on Saturday night against a very average Louisville team who lost to a 7-5 Kentucky team the week before, beat Louisville 16-6. Totally different. Florida State had an impressive 59-0 win over a good Wisconsin team. Not saying Louisville wasn't good. They were ranked 14th at the time, but probably a little overrated. But everybody wants to bring up the ACC's record against the SEC. We weren't going down a list of the best team versus the ACC versus the best team of the SEC, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, making it comparable in the league. I mean, you had the best win for the ACC that year was this year was Florida State over LSU. But that's Alabama's 3rd best win. Florida State's best win was Alabama's 3rd best win. Georgia, Ole Miss, LSU for Alabama in that order. Florida State's, that's 1. People like North Carolina, South Carolina. We're comparing mid-tier teams here. Like, that would not be ranked in the same order. We'd have to rank them. If we really wanted to know whose conference is better, and it is the SEC, you'd have to go Florida State versus Alabama, Georgia versus Louisville, North Carolina versus LSU or Ole Miss. Like, that's how you would have to really figure out. No one cares about the bottom of the barrel of the leagues. Come on, guys. It just doesn't even make any sense. But again, any other year, Florida State's most likely in 9 out of 10 times. But like I said, this 2023 season was the exception, not the rule. I think if Florida State wants to be mad at anybody, Florida State fans, the program, the coaches, staff, administration, it's just an unfortunate event. And honestly, this may work out better for you because you were not going to go win the national championship and no one would ever remember really. They remember you making the playoffs, but it wouldn't feel as bad because you're probably going to end your season on a loss. You could go beat – if they go beat Georgia, finish 14-0, they have a lot of momentum riding in to the 24 season, get some more portal kids, get a kid to help them from the quarterback position after Jordan Travis leaving. They would build up a lot of momentum, probably more momentum from that standpoint than if they went to the playoffs and got blown out by Michigan in the first round, or maybe they won the first round and got blown out in those playoffs. I also don't think TCU's performance against Georgia last year helped Florida State. Some people may disagree with me, but I think people we don't want to see this again. It's not Florida State's fault. A lot of teams would be in this situation with a backup quarterback. They would. And people ask me, well, if Jalen Milroe tore his ACL against Georgia in the last minute of the game the other day, you wouldn't put them out. I would. If Ty Simpson or Tyler Buckner is now going to play lacrosse, I guess today, we'll talk about the portal here in a bit. But if those guys, you have to factor that in. We're talking about the 4 best teams, and I'm not comparing an 8-4 undefeated team. We're talking about splitting hairs here from a team that doesn't have a loss or a team with 1 loss. But I think just wrapping this up, the committee did the best job they possibly could when comparing, again, the full picture, the body of work with the eye test. Because realistically, if you want the true 4 best teams I told you, is Michigan, Texas, Alabama, and Georgia. We all know, guys, they weren't going to put Georgia. I think the only thing they messed up not helping themselves is they probably should have put Florida State at 6. How can you say Florida State is better than Georgia at 5? Come on. If you're going to say they're not good enough to get in the playoffs, they're probably not better than Georgia either. Probably should have put Bama 4, Georgia 5, Florida State 6. That would have helped them. But I think they ultimately met in the middle. Again, compare body of work, eye test, ask coaches, who would you rather play? Ask these former coaches on the committee, who would you rather play, Alabama or Florida State? And those guys are realistic. I mean, go look at Michigan's reaction when they found out who was number 4. Go watch it. It was a ooh. But again, I think they got it right. Michigan 1, Washington 2, Texas 3, Alabama 4. I think it's going to be a hell of a playoff. You got Michigan, Alabama that afternoon in the Rose Bowl, which will be a fantastic game. That's going to be awesome. That's going to be awesome. I'm assuming Herbstreit Fowler will be on that one. You got the night game in the Sugar Bowl, Texas and Washington. I'm sure that place will be overran with Texas Longhorn fans. It'll be the first trip for a couple of those guys from Washington down to the Big Easy. But, man, I think they got it right. I'm excited for this playoff, more so than I've been in a while. I think we got a real shot to see a lot of different combinations here. Just surface level right now, if you had to predict, I'm going to go Alabama, Texas in a rematch in Houston in the national championship game. Jalen Milroe's hometown. We're in the state of Texas. But don't be surprised if the Huskies show up now. I think they have some matchup problems that I think as we study this matchup more, you'll be surprised. From an Alabama-Michigan standpoint, just briefly before we go talk Alabama-Georgia, review that a little bit. I think Alabama has an advantage here. Michigan wants to play a little bit in a phone booth, and Alabama welcomes that. They want to play a physical matchup. Michigan's not going to surprise you much with scheme. I don't think Michigan's just going to be able to run right at Alabama 18, 20 times like they did or straight against Penn State. And I think Michigan and Jim Harbaugh know that. But I think it's a favorable matchup for Alabama. Michigan has not seen a quarterback like Jalen Milroe. They haven't seen some of the athletes they'll see at Alabama's skill position like Isaiah Bond and Jermaine Burton. I saw Michigan's favored by 2.5 right now. I think it's a favorable matchup for Alabama, but it should be a heck of a game. I'm fired up. Like I mentioned, but we just want to talk about the playoffs. But I think tip of the cap, golf clap, whatever you want to do. I think the committee ultimately got it right as realistically as possible without totally – I mean, you couldn't have kept out 2 undefeated Power 5 conference champs, and that's what would have happened. Washington and Florida State would have been out. You'd had to put Georgia in. And I don't think you could have done that. I really don't. Oh, we got 2 chats in here. Thank you, David, for listening. Best content in the game. David Hopper, big Texas fan, listening live in Austin. About to be joining the SEC next year. David, thank you for listening. Both Davids. Appreciate it, guys. Strong name. Strong first name. I like it. King David. Speaking of kings, Alabama, the king of the SEC, gets the 27-24 win over the Georgia Bulldogs on Saturday afternoon, finished up Saturday evening. I thought this one was a total coin flip going into it. I told you that all week going into it. And in actuality, Alabama controlled most of this game. They were up 10 majority of it. Alabama, I thought, won on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Now, the numbers won't completely be overwhelming, but I thought Alabama's offensive line especially ran the ball when they had to. Could have probably ran for more. I mean, they rushed for 114 yards, an average of 2.8 yards per carry. Not fantastic, but if you watch the game, you felt like they controlled it. I know subjective as that sounds or as weird as that, they controlled it, even in pass protection. They gave up 4 sacks statistically, but I think 3 of those were on Jalen Milroe. So I really think you only chalk up 1 sack to Alabama's offensive line. And again, Georgia hadn't rushed the passer that well this year, but I thought the offensive line did a phenomenal job. The numbers aren't going to show it, but if you watch the game, go back and watch it, you'll see they just controlled the line of scrimmage. On the defensive side of the ball, they held Georgia's offense to 78 yards rushing. Outside of that first drive and Kendall Milton's 17-yard rushing touchdown, Georgia didn't ever really get anything going on the ground, and Alabama didn't really ever bring more than 4 in any situations. Nick Saban said that on the SEC Network post-game desk with Roman Harper. But after Georgia, here's a stat. After Georgia's opening touchdown in the opening drive, they had 8 drives that resulted in 4 punts, 2 field goals attempts. Remember, they made 1, missed 1. A fumble and turnover on downs for 3 points. Alabama's defense, they played really well. They did. That's where the game was going to be won. Guys like Trey Amos, like I mentioned, Caleb Downs, Malachi Moore had to hold up against Brock Bowers so they could keep. Only one time was in the third quarter, Arian Black. They went formation into the boundary, got Alabama mixed up a little bit. Who was it? I think it was it Christian Story? It got mixed up a little bit. Maybe Jalen Key. I think it was Jalen Key got mixed up at safety for Alabama when Georgia motioned formation into the boundary and got here. That was the only time I saw Alabama totally blow a coverage, about a 40-yard game. They didn't give up explosives for runs. After that first drive, I'm telling you, Alabama fantastic. 8 drives, 4 punts, 2 field goals attempts, fumble, turnover on downs. But going back to the other side of the ball, Georgia's defensive line, call me crazy, but this might be Georgia's worst defensive line. Sorry, Georgia's worst defensive line since Kirby's first year in 2016. I mean, I think Warren Brinson's good. Nazir Stackhouse is good. I mean, he got Alabama's duo blocks of the right guard with Jaden Roberts and J.C. Latham was dumb. I mean, there's a video out there. I encourage you to go look. They are literally knocking Nazir Stackhouse off his feet on the ground, putting him on his tail. But Nazir Stackhouse, solid player. Michael Williams, all really good players. But the depth's not there. You got Chaz Chambliss, Marvin Jones Jr. They're really good players, but they aren't really to the level of the edge guys that you've seen Georgia had in the past. Guys like Nolan Smith, guys like that. They just aren't. So I thought that was something to notice too. You could tell Georgia's like, man, I hadn't seen Georgia get whipped like this in a while. Because I mean, you're thinking the last 2 years, Jordan Davis 2 years ago, Jalen Carter last year. They had dudes on the inside that could be game wreckers. They don't have that this year, and you notice, and they don't have the depth either. I thought the play that kind of changed the game, it was early at the end of the first quarter, is the 3rd and 2 call for Mike Bobo. I'm about to show it to you. The 3rd and 2 call for Mike Bobo here, the toss into the boundary. Didn't really understand this at all. As you can see, situation, Georgia's up 7-3. Alabama, again, Georgia scored on that drive easily. Alabama had to punt, got Georgia the ball. Alabama stopped them. And then Alabama got a field goal. So it's 7-3. Georgia's probably feeling good right now. About to roll into the second quarter, 3rd and 2. And they run this. A toss into the boundary. Alabama sniffed it out, one up front. I didn't really get it.
They're down to 2. Run blitz. It
You
pays
see
off.
Caleb Downs too.
They're down to 2.
Blows it up.
Run blitz.
Keeps contains it. Forces it back inside. Dallas Turner kind of sets his edge there too. I mean, look at anybody on Alabama really. But I mean, this was a bad
They're down
call.
to 2. Run blitz.
I mean, it really wasn't. Trezman Marshall, former Georgia Bulldog, inside back, playing with his hair on fire. You're looking at 7-year-old athlete, so Will Riker here. Career point leader.
They're down to 2.
Look at Trezman Marshall
Run
running with his
blitz.
hair on fire.
And it pays off.
But this is a bad call. I think Alabama took the momentum.
Run blitz.
Alabama took the momentum from this place. And you thought they never gave it
They're down
back.
to 2. Run
They
blitz.
never gave it back.
And it pays off.
Yeah, I looked at this was the game that kind of set the tone. Some people may call me crazy, but I think this was the play that kind of set the tone for the rest of the game here. And again, Alabama never gave that momentum back. I thought Carson Beck, he was pressing a little bit. Didn't play bad. Had over a 65% completion percentage, but he looked like he was pressing. I mean, that would make sense. I mean, given his best 2 weapons, both lingered with Vlad McConkey and Brock Bowers, both having injuries. They're both limited. But I just thought you could see it on his face a little bit. He's pressing. Alabama should have had 2 or 3 interceptions. He threw 4 interceptable balls. I mean, Christian Story down there when Georgia was inside the red zone, he threw it right to him and dropped it. Trey Amos could have had another one too. I thought of a couple. Maybe was it Jalen Key? Maybe later, or Kool-Aid McKinstry. I forget. One of them had one potential one as well. But again, Alabama just showing they are one of the more, if not the most resilient team in the country this year. Example, when Georgia cut it to 3 early in the fourth quarter, Bama went down and scored, went right back at it, got Isaiah Bond. Remember, they reviewed it. They had to go back. Alabama ultimately snuck it in or got Roydell Williams a touchdown. It was kind of over at that point. Got it right back to 10. They answered when they could have folded. I mean, Georgia had a real shot to go win that game once they cut it to 10 early in the fourth quarter. But Alabama went down there and acted like they'd done it before. Alabama had 0 back-breaking plays. I didn't think they played their best, which was crazy. I thought it would take that. Neither team played their best, but Alabama didn't have the back-breaking plays like Georgia did, like the fumble deep in your own territory that Georgia did. That their defense played well, held Alabama to a field goal, had to have that. Missed field goal off the false start. If there's not a false start before the miss to back it up 5 yards, he probably makes it. Stuff like that. But where do we go now? Like we always talk about, Alabama heading to the Rose Bowl, playing Michigan on January 1st. I think this was easily the best coaching job of Nick Saban's career. He really he enjoys coaching this team. Because like he mentions all the time, they're a team. And I think he enjoys seeing them getting better. These guys actually care about each other. They like being around each other. I think he's really proud of his coaching staff. This is the most complimentary I've always seen him giving credit. He's always been like that, but he's given – this is more genuine credit. Like, man, I'm real proud of how our coaches, Tommy Rees, Kevin Stiller, Travarius Robinson, Robert Ballett, inside linebacker who came over from Liberty. We're developing guys. You can tell he's had a real fun time coaching this team. Alabama's got a real shot to win the national championship. I know it's like, no kidding. They're in the Final Four. I like their matchups right now. I really do. I mean, I like all these matchups in the playoffs, but Alabama's playing their best ball right now. Has not played their best game, but I think they're playing their best ball. Again, I like the matchup against Michigan. I think Michigan's not going to come out and surprise Alabama. Alabama's going to watch 13 games of Michigan and know exactly what Michigan wants to do. And Michigan's not going to really change much. I think the key there will be how well does J.J. McCarthy play. Now, Michigan does have a physical offensive line. Now, Georgia did too. But once Mims went out for Georgia, Georgia's offensive line really wasn't the same out there. Michigan has 4-5 starters back from last year. It's an experienced group. They're kind of ready to get over that. They're kind of ready to get over that hump. Just because Michigan's never, I mean, you're probably going to hear a lot of SEC, Alabama fans like, well, Michigan can't win this game. They never win. They lose to Georgia, they lose to TCU. Just because they haven't doesn't mean they can't. Remember that. Just because they haven't doesn't mean they can't. Alabama's got to go play a nice, clean game. But I like the quarterback here. I like the quarterback matchup for Alabama here. Michigan has not seen a quarterback like Jalen Milroe from an athletic Lamar Jackson type clone guy. Alabama's seen the J.J. McCarthy's. A little bit of Jackson Dart-ish. Probably not even the passing ability. But, yeah, really fun to watch. Alabama, just a resilient team coming back. Man, a lot of people left them for dead. I wouldn't say I left them for dead, but I expected this team to roll in on December 4th probably with 2 or 3 losses. I think the preseason I had them going 10-2, losing to Texas and Texas A&M, and then losing to Georgia in the SEC championship. So, yeah, I had them finishing 10-3. Not far off, but, again, man, impressive. Georgia heading to the Orange Bowl, facing Florida State. Be interesting matchup. I think Georgia's favored by about 15.5 right now in this one. It'll depend who sits for Georgia. Carson Beck's about to announce, is he coming back for the NFL draft? I think he is, because you got to think Brock Vandagriff, just the backup quarterback for Georgia, just entered the portal. So I think if he thought Carson Beck was leaving, he would have stayed, because a good chance it had been his job. Probably going to get something worked out for Carson Beck from an NIL perspective. The Classic City Collective, I'm sure they'll get something for him. But he has a chance to come back, even in this game against Florida State, put up some real good tape for the scouts next year. I don't think he had his best game against Alabama. Wasn't bad statistically, but he has a chance to prove it in this one. For Florida State, I think they got more to prove in this game than Georgia. But they have some guys sit out. That'll be a question. Depends who is sitting out in this game. But Georgia's not going anywhere. They're still a top 2, worst 2. Depends what Alabama. If Alabama wins the national championship this year, I think Alabama's back on top. But Georgia's right there. We're comparing 1A, 1B. But Georgia's not going anywhere, guys. They'll win in a couple other national championships for Kirby Smart's through. Either I could see this going a couple other ways. Kirby Smart getting a little worn out, or this lights an extra fire under him. Maybe they got a little complacent, and he's probably going to say that when you talk to him in the offseason, the SEC media days next year. They got a little complacent. They won 29 straight games, and they've won 29 of their last 30. They're not going anywhere, guys. Georgia's just fine. Just struggle to beat Alabama and Atlanta. It's starting to become a thing. It's starting to become a thing. And I'll say this, if Jameson Williams and John Mechie don't get hurt, they probably don't beat Alabama in the national championship a couple of years ago. Call me crazy. I'm just kind of being honest here. But Georgia, again, 1A, 1B in college football right now. And you could still make an argument they may be the best program in college football right now. Again, this is a team that's only lost 29. They've won 29 of the last 30 games. But if Milroe and Carson Beck both come back for both teams, Alabama will probably be preseason number 1, Georgia number 2. Then they play again next year. Remember, September 28th in Tuscaloosa. That's the rumored date. Chris Lowe, who was on the show last week, broke that news. Apparently, SEC wasn't real happy how he got that. But the SEC on the SEC network, they'll officially have dates revealed for all these games on December 13th, which is next Wednesday. But my point, Alabama and Georgia will probably both be preseason number 1, number 2, top 3, easily top 5. But they will play next year. Guaranteed. Projected date, September 28th. But again, fantastic game. SEC championship game. That environment, that feel is just awesome. Heard it was great from people that went. But Alabama is the king of the SEC. They're in the playoffs, have a real shot when everybody left them for dead across the country. Again, not me, but I didn't expect this. I'd be lying to you if I said that. But no, Alabama, real shot to go do what a lot of people didn't think they could. And I saw Jalen Milroe at their banquet last night, was announced MVP of the season. Improved tremendously. Also got to give Tommy Rees some credit to that. Alabama staff just really, and I was hard on him. Coach Eric Wolford, the offensive line coach, after South Florida game, I was on Alabama's coach's staff's tail. But I always a big fan of Robert Bala. I thought Alabama's inside linebackers just the best they played in years. Jahad Campbell, Deontay Lawson, Tresman Marshall, all those guys just stepped to the plate. I feel like the last few years, it's nothing against Pete Golden. They just kind of underachieved. Kevin Steele, great DC. Travaris Robinson has the best group of defensive backs in the country. I thought Eric Wolford and his offensive line group have improved tremendously that year. Caden Proctor, the true freshman who struggled early, has only gotten better. It's just a resilient team. It just kept getting better. And like I said, Georgia, not going anywhere. Again, we're splitting at hairs here. We're talking the 1A, 1B, best two programs in college football right now. But we also learned there were some 8 other teams who found out their bowl destination yesterday after they announced the college football playoffs. I think they announced at 1:30 after that and through the evening. But the SEC bowl games, remember the Rose Bowl, Alabama versus Georgia, or Alabama versus Michigan. Michigan currently favored by 1.5. The Goodyear Cotton Bowl, we got Missouri versus Ohio State. Ohio State currently favored by 2.5. Again, who's going to be playing this game? I'm sure Missouri has bought up their entire allotment already. I think I actually saw that. Ohio State already has 12 guys in the transfer portal, including their quarterback, Kyle McCord, one of their better receivers, Julian Fleming. Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz were going to really want this one because this could really help them in recruiting. Perception will be big here. They got a real shot to do this. I would take – it's early. I hadn't really broke down this game. I'd take Missouri minus 2.5 right now. I would. I mean, Ohio State's got 12 guys in the portal. Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, Ole Miss versus Penn State. Penn State currently favored by 4.5. I like Ole Miss in this one. I do. I think Lane Kiffin knows he needs a big win in one of these college football playoff bowls. This is his second one in 3 years. They probably don't like how it's a tough pill to swallow losing to Baylor when they lost Matt Corral in the first series or second series of that Sugar Bowl. But I like Ole Miss in here. I think they're going to prepare hard. This will be a big win for Ole Miss, and I think Penn State's just okay. They're that team that never beats anyone who's a little bit better than them on paper, but they rarely lose, maybe once to someone who they shouldn't. I take Ole Miss minus 4.5. Capital One Orange Bowl, we mentioned Georgia favored by 15.5 versus Florida State. It will all depend who's playing. The Tax Act Texas Bowl, Texas A&M will not be without it. They'll be without a lot of players. Their interim coach is going. I don't even know who they're going to promote the head coach now that Elijah Robinson left. They're favored by 4.5 against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's not great, but what will Texas A&M really be playing for in this one? What will Texas A&M really be playing for in this one? The Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, Kentucky versus Clemson. Clemson currently favored by 7. Will be interesting. Clemson, speaking of former SEC head coach at Ole Miss, Matt Luke, new offensive line coach at Clemson. Defensive line coach in the SEC, former at Alabama and Florida, Chris Rump. He just got hired at Clemson. I kind of like Clemson in that one. I don't know how I feel about Kentucky in that one, but Clemson's minus 7 right now. The Trans-Perfect Music City Bowl, Auburn favored by 2.5 for Mike versus Mike Loxley and Talia Tagovailoa in the Maryland Terrapins. Interesting line there. Hugh Freeze will not want to finish with a losing record. You best Auburn will prepare for that. Auburn probably has a lot more to gain from that one. The ReliaQuest Bowl, LSU currently favored by 10.5 versus Wisconsin. Give me LSU all day in this one. This may be my biggest lock of the bowl season off just the surface level right now. Wisconsin's not great. Love those guys over there in Luke Fickell. They're a client of ours at Quick U, but, so is LSU. But LSU's just going to out-athlete them. After Jaden Daniels does his victory lap with the Heisman after he wins it next year, he's going to go top it off with a big win here. The Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, Tennessee minus 7 down in Orlando versus Iowa. I like Tennessee in this one again. It'll be interesting. Do they let Nico Lamalavea play in this one, or is it they're going to let Joe Milton just ride it out? That'll be interesting for that one. But those are the bowl games, current spreads heading into them. We'll give it another week and a half, 2 weeks, where we give you some predictions on these, just so I can have some time to go break them down. But just wanted to initially talk about it, preview it a little bit. Let's see if we got any questions heading in here. Nope, not yet. But again, I told you, the transfer portal opened up today on December 4th. It's going through the next 30 days through January 2nd. Perfect storm right here is what they call it in college football. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the recruiting portal window, high school recruiting, retention of your roster, players meetings, bowl prep, coaching changes. You heard me at the beginning. It's a ton going on right now. people's heads are just spinning if you're on one of these college football staffs right now. They really are. It's a lot for staffs across the country right now. Guys are in the portal all over the place. They've announced before last week, but now they're officially in filling out the paperwork with these compliance departments. Like I said, Ohio State, 12 guys entered the portal, including Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming. And sometimes some of these guys, I talked to someone at Ohio State today, and I know we're an SEC show, but I know people on most staffs. Some of these guys are just testing the water to be like, hey, I have a free transfer. What's my value? I want to see what my value is. And your value is what someone's willing to pay you. So if Kyle McCord, they want to give him $1 million to stay, that's what his value is. But a lot of these guys are jumping into the portal, jumping right into the deep end and being like, hey, I'm going to tread water here and see what my value is. Are you going to throw me out one of those $1 million safety lines out there and reel me back in? Or are you just going to let me tread water out here until I get tired and make, you know what, I want to come back, coach. If I get a decent analogy, I just thought of off the top of my head. And then it's a business, guys. And then some teams will throw money at a kid just to make, you know what, if we throw him $25,000, he's not going to totally bite on this, but we're going to make our rival have to go into their budget a little bit and pay him a little more than they initially thought. And that may not help. That may not be able to make that team afford another kid down the road, which could be a depth guy. Again, these teams are getting smart. These collectives are getting smarter, at least the good ones, like the Rebel, the Grove Collective. I know Auburn's doing it. It's like NFL, Moneyball. You have, it's not as much money as some people are getting, but I've heard anywhere from most kids, depending on what position, $300,000 to $2 million. Obviously, the quarterback transfer portal is its own entity. I mean, those prices go all over the place. And we'll talk about some of those guys that are in there in just a second. Then you got some average defensive linemen going in at $300,000, $350,000. But then you got guys like Walter Nolan, who are first-round interior defensive linemen that don't grow on trees, just like a lot of offensive linemen. There's a Southern Miss offensive lineman in the transfer portal right now that's OV to Ole Miss. He's getting looked at Texas A&M. He's not that good, but there's not that many good offensive linemen out there. People stretch on offensive linemen, even at the NFL level. They like projects that they think can be molded. But again, you got to have a price on the position, on the specific position. And if they're a real high quality player, Walter Nolan, that price, let's just say for a defensive lineman of $400 could go up double to $800. He's that good. It's a first round NFL draft pick. Remember, I just talked about Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter. It's those kind of guys on the interior that can help you win a championship. He's going to have a ton of suitors. But again, a lot of these guys are just jumping in. Like I asked somebody, like, where's Kyle McCord, starting quarterback for Ohio State, going? Where's he going to get anything better? And they told me, hey, he's just jumping in to see what he can get. Does someone offer him some money? Does Ohio State offer him some money? That's where we're at right now in the transfer portal. Between that, retaining your roster, talking to your collective, the guys who manage your budget, hey, what can we do for this guy? Let's try to get it set up when they come in on these visits. This is a hectic 30 days. Remember, January 2nd, from today to January 2nd, you're also signing your high school kids on the early signing period. You're out on the road. If you have coaching staff changes, you're interviewing those guys probably in different cities. Oh, we're in a bowl game. We got to start prepping for that. Oh, we're in the playoffs. We really got to lock in on that. It's a lot going on right now, but that's where we're at right now. That's why they have shows like on 247 right now, just dedicated a full day to the transfer portal. But just some notable additions. I was going to go over every kid from the SEC, but it was a tsunami of kids when I went through the portal and looked at it today. I was like, I would just waste my listeners' times. They wouldn't even know who a lot of these kids are, but notable ones across the country. Like I mentioned, Kyle McCord, the starting quarterback at Ohio State. He's a junior. Backup quarterback Brock Vandergrift from quarterback from Georgia, is a redshirt sophomore. That should tell you Carson Beck's probably coming back for Georgia. Dylan Gabriel, former UCF quarterback, now at Oklahoma. He's there in the portal. Word is he may follow Jeff Levy to Mississippi State. Speaking of Mississippi State, Will Rogers, linked to Kentucky. Will Rogers, former Mississippi State quarterback. He is linked to Kentucky. He is – sorry, making sure that didn't – for whatever reason, it's flickering back here today. I'm sorry. But Will Rogers, former Mississippi State quarterback, he's in the portal. I mentioned last episode, Riley Leonard, the Duke quarterback. He's in the portal, rumored to go to Notre Dame. Quarterback from Vanderbilt, the Cam Newton twin, Walter Taylor, sophomore, he's out. Another quarterback, A.J. Swan for Vanderbilt, he's out. Tareen Carter, defensive tackle for Arkansas, redshirt senior, he's out. Chris Pooh-Paul, linebacker at Arkansas, he's out. I mean, Chris Pooh-Paul's dad had an interesting take on a radio show while his kid was left. He said NIL was ruining it because Chris Pooh-Paul got tired of his teammates just, once they get paid, they just got lazy and they didn't care. And he's like, I want to be around a winning culture. Now, is that Sam Pittman's fault? Maybe. Now, is the dad blowing some smoke? Sure. But again, that's kind of the nature we're going through. I'll keep you updated on my social media in every episode talking about the portal, especially when commits come to SEC schools, no matter who it is. And then bigger names, because we're going to have kids all over. If you go look on three's transfer portal page, you'll scroll for 15 pages a kid. Didn't want to waste the listeners' time. Just want to kind of set the tone of what these college football staffs, these coaches are going through, the mindset of these kids who are entering the portal that may not really want to leave. They just want to be like, hey, you know what? I got this one-time transfer still. Or I got my graduate transfer. What what's my value? What's my value? May have some feelings hurt, but I think that's what it is. It's a game. It's business right now. But this is going to go on through January 2nd, rolling into this next semester. I just want to talk about the transfer portal opening up today. SEC basketball transitioning over. Weirdest start to a season I can remember. I mean, let's look at the weekend recap here. I mean, we have had so many just upsets. I mean, it feels like everyone has a bad loss in the league except South Carolina and Ole Miss, who are undefeated. And even Texas A&M didn't have a bad one. But this was Friday night's action. Georgia getting the 80-69 win over Mercer. South Carolina stays undefeated 89-67 over George Washington. LSU getting a 73-66 win over Southeastern Louisiana. On Saturday, Ole Miss stays undefeated, gets a big win over Memphis, who played well this year, 80-77. Kentucky, after beating Miami, this was another big upset. We'll get into the other upset from yesterday, Mississippi State Southern, but UNC Wilmington, who's lost to Vanderbilt, got the 80-73 win at Rupp Arena after Kentucky dominated Miami 4 days before that. Massive loss to Kentucky. But that sums up the SEC in non-conference play. Remember, like I told you, the SEC is lost 8 quad 3, quad 4 games so far that the net rankings release. The net rankings in college basketball, which calculates the quad 1, 2, 3, 4 wins for college basketball. NCAA tournament looks at that hard. That's massive. But the SEC, it came out today. They have 8 of those quad 3, quad 4 losses already. Some teams haven't even played 8 games yet. So that shows you the SEC struggling in non-conference play right now. Rough loss at home for Kentucky. Vanderbilt getting a 78-59 win over Alabama A&M. And then yesterday, Auburn taking a rough loss on the road at App State. It's not a bad team. Weird environment. Salute Auburn, Bruce Pearl going to play that game, but they took a loss to App State at home by 5. Missouri getting the 82-72 win over Wichita State. But even Missouri has a rough loss. Lost to 0-4 Jackson State earlier a couple weeks ago. The Mississippi State with the shocker of the week, losing to Southern University, the SWAC school in Baton Rouge, 60-59. Mississippi State, after starting it off 6-0, lost both their games to 2 really bad teams this week at Georgia Tech in the ACC SEC Challenge and Southern University yesterday. I don't understand Christian's guard rotation right now. I really don't. The Fort kid had been shooting well. Tyler Hubbard had been shooting well, and he hadn't really been playing him as much. I thought they were going to have a really good record rolling into conference play, and they were going to get Tolu Smith. I'm like, dang, look at Mississippi State. Last week in my power rankings, I'm about to look at my new ones, which could be all over the place. You could tell me how big of an idiot I am. But Mississippi State was my third-ranked team in my power rankings last week. This is a bad loss. It's been a bad week for Mississippi State basketball. Chris Jans has to get that rotation figured out. Has to. But we got some games going on right now as well. We got Arkansas with the 40-35 halftime lead over Furman. The Paladins, they're not bad, but they beat Virginia last year in the NCAA tournament. Alabama currently at half up 21, 49-28 over Arkansas State. Former Alabama assistant Brian Hodgkin, who taken his first year at Arkansas State. He'd been with NATO's for 8 years, going back to Buffalo and at Alabama. So it's kind of a homecoming reunion for him. But that's where we stand right now. We can go ahead and look at the rest of the week before we get into the power ranks. You got Georgia Mason, Tennessee tomorrow night, Merrimack, Florida, Georgia Tech, Georgia, Mount St. Mary's versus Ole Miss. Wednesday night's the underrated match here. It's in the Palmetto State, Battle of Undefeateds. We'll get into that one in just a minute, but you got San Francisco making a trip to Nashville against Vanderbilt. And then South Carolina, Clemson, Battle of Undefeateds. Clemson already has a road win at Coleman Coliseum in Tuscaloosa last week against Alabama in the ACC SEC Challenge. That's going to be a fun matchup on Wednesday. 2 rivals, both undefeated, both better than people expected. Clemson a top 25 team now. South Carolina hadn't really beat a lot of people, but still they're undefeated. DePaul heads to College Station for a big matchup. And then that's it on Thursday. And we'll talk about the matchups. We got a massive weekend coming up, December 9th, probably the best day of college basketball so far in the country. We got a big one. But we'll talk about that one in a minute. But let's get to my power rankings before we get you out of here. Share my screen for you. See if you can see this. Yep. Can you see that? All right. My power rankings for week 4. We're going through it. We'll start at the bottom. 14th, Vanderbilt. It's just not a very good basketball team right now. I think them and LSU, same category. I don't really like either one of these teams right now. So I think I was going back and forth. Projected LSU to finish last in the league going into the season, but could pick splitting hairs here, 13th, 14th. But I got Vanderbilt at 14th, LSU 13th, Missouri coming in at 12th. Solid win against Wichita State yesterday, but still that Jackson State loss just lingers with me. Georgia, no real bad losses, but best win probably Wake Forest. Granted, Wake Forest beat Florida last week in that ACC SEC Challenge. Georgia is a team who could rise up in this. So they're a little better probably than I have them ranked. South Carolina, same situation. They're undefeated, but it's more of I want to see it. I want to see what they look like against Clemson on the road this week. They could move up drastically in these power rankings. I'm real interested to see how they look. But Mookie Johnson, BJ Mack, they all look better. Mississippi State, they were 3 last week. They had the biggest drop coming in at 9th. Rough week, like I mentioned, against Georgia Tech and Southern University last week. They got to get that rotation in the backcourt figured out. Ole Miss, they're undefeated. They've improved each week. Give Chris Beard credit. They got a big win against Memphis this past week. Chris Beard's a hell of a ball coach, guys. Ole Miss could be argued higher. Both South Carolina and Ole Miss could be argued higher. See some people putting them in the top 4. I don't think that. But Ole Miss coming in at 8th. Florida, once they get healthy, I think they're going to be right in this range, 5 to 7, maybe move up to 4, could be up to 8th. They're going to be on the bubble. I think they're going to be right there at the end of the year, trying to get an NCAA tournament bid. But I like this Florida team right now. Auburn, still struggling to shoot from beyond the arc. Really, like they're a scrappy team. They're deep in the front court, but just struggle to shoot from beyond the field. It showed yesterday against App State. Still think they're 6, but I do like Janai Broome. Arkansas got a solid win last week against Duke at home in the ACC SEC Challenge, but still have some rough losses. Up 5 right now at home against Furman at halftime. We'll go join right into that right after the show. But I think Arkansas, deep, talented. I think they're still right there. Alabama 4, love the offense, love scoring. They already put up 41 points tonight against Arkansas State at the half. It's going to come down to defense. They may have the best offense in the SEC, but they could be in the conversation for the worst defense. Nick Pringle currently suspended for Alabama. Don't have a lot of front court depth. It'll be interesting to see how Alabama is. Kentucky, I think on paper they could be. You could argue them 1. But that's a tough loss to UNC Wilmington after a big win at home against Miami. It's 2 opposite ends of the spectrum, win and loss. They're a good one and a bad one. Remember, Vanderbilt beat UNC Wilmington. But Kentucky, once they get Aaron Bradshaw back, Big Z, I like their veteran presence with Antonio Reeves and Mitchell. This team could be really good at the end of the year. I think it's the highest ceiling Cal team they've had in a while. I think he likes coaching this team, but they got to be more consistent. Tennessee, I keep putting Tennessee high. I like Tennessee. I like their floor. That's why I got 1 and 2 here. As I just told you, Tennessee was 2, so you can probably figure out who's number 1. You see it on the screen. These are the 2 high floor ceiling teams. But again, if Alabama probably beats Clemson last week, they may be number 1 for me. And if they win 1 out of their next 3, they'll probably be 1 at some point because they play Purdue and Toronto on Saturday, and they play Arizona and they play Creighton. That is murderer's row of 3 games. So who is the number 1 team in the SEC? I don't know. Again, it's a bad non-conference showing 8 quad 3, quad 4 losses combined right now. Some teams haven't even played 8 games yet. It's been a rough non-conference slate for the SEC. I still expect 7, 8 teams in the dance right now. 9, be tough to make that argument right now, but I think this is where it is right now. Tell me where I'm wrong, where I'm right. I posted this around 2, 3 o'clock today on my Twitter page, Facebook, Instagram. You'll tell me where I'm wrong. I'd love to hear yours. And again, I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Mach 10 Sports. Again, if you like what we're doing, go please like, subscribe. It's free. If you're watching on YouTube, go hit the subscribe button. Not enough people are doing that. If you're on podcasts, like us, subscribe, rate, review. Again, I worked in college football, worked in college athletics for 10 years, 4 different SEC schools, graduated from the University of Alabama. I feel like I have a good insight. I'm going to be wrong sometimes. And the good thing about me is I admit when I'm wrong. I do a lot of segments where I was right, where I was wrong. And I can admit where I'm wrong, but I feel like I bring a good perspective that you can't get on other shows. But again, go like, go rate us, go comment. It's free to do. It's free to do. I encourage you to go do it. But again, we covered a lot today. Covered the college football playoff. Gave you my 2 cents on that. I thought they got the most realistically 4 group they could. Not the 4 best, but where they could get away with it. They messed themselves up a little bit, not putting Georgia ahead of Florida State, but that is what it is. We talked about the transfer portal. We reviewed the SEC championship. Told you where I thought the momentum of that game changed. It was that 3rd and 2 toss play into the boundary that Mike Bobo called, the end of the first quarter. Alabama took that momentum, never really gave it back. Again, like I said, we talked transfer portal, we talked college, SEC college basketball. The SEC is drunk right now in non-conference. They got to get better. Gave you my power rankings. But again, we're rocking and rolling. Got another episode coming up for you on Thursday. I'm sure a ton will happen by the transfer portal at that point. I'll update you on that. But again, I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Mach 10 Sports. You have a great day.